Ross freaking Hodge. That's right. Ross freaking Hodge. That's exactly what Grant McCaslin said to Wren Baker when Wren Baker called him to ask him about his coaching candidates. What is up, and welcome to this live edition of Couz's Corner and Hoops from the Hills. Thank you for joining the show. Also, thanks to those of you who are watching on X. If you are watching on X, please come over to the two channels, Hoops from the Hills and Couz's Corner, and subscribe. I am going to experiment with combining football and basketball content on the Couz's Corner channel. Hopefully that will make life easier for those of you who like to follow both sports. You don't have to go between two channels to get the content. And then hopefully will make my life easier too, putting it all on one. But I will continue to put the content up on Hoops from the Hills at least for a while as well. But let's talk about Ross Hodge and his press conference yesterday. Very interesting. I listened to it while I was traveling back from a meeting I had for work. Made for great listening. We obviously got to hear Wren Baker's opening remarks, got to hear Hodge's opening remarks, and then they opened it up for media questions. But I just jotted down a few notes. And the one thing I took out of the meeting, and it was also kind of conveyed in an article over at my website, WVSportsChat.com, that was written by Shauna Rose over there. Great job by her. But she talked about how, I think she called it the West Virginia mentality, and I called it Mountaineer mentality, but it's the same thing. And I think Ross Hodge has it. I think, he's blue collar. He talked about how he grew up, his mother working 3 jobs to make ends meet. I mean, does that not relate? Or can West Virginians, or at least a lot of us, not relate to those types of stories? So, hard work is one of his mantras. He holds people accountable for not working hard. He plays hard on the defensive end. His teams play hard on the defensive end. He demands that. He holds guys accountable. I mean, just to me, everything embodies West Virginia. Little side note, I really enjoyed his Texas accent. He's got a pretty strong Texas accent. I enjoy listening to. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. But I just jotted down a few notes here. Obviously, he started the press conference with West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home, country roads. I mean, what a better way to embrace yourself to the fan base than that, right? Or embrace the fan base and have the fan base embrace you. He talked about how he went to the baseball game the night before. Obviously, there were clips floating around of that on social media, him meeting fans, getting to experience a live West Virginia event for the first time. And it was a great one to go to because it was a record-setting attendance at the Kendrick family ballpark in the backyard brawl game against Pitt. So he picked a great baseball game to attend. His family was there with him. They obviously got to hear the West Virginia version of Sweet Caroline. And he told a funny story about how he makes his players do push-ups. If they curse at practice, he does the same thing. And he talked about how he and his family were going to be doing a lot of push-ups over the singing of that version of the song. I thought that was funny. He doesn't take himself too seriously. And even though he's a man of faith, he doesn't seem to be, what's the word I'm looking for? He's still easy to talk to, those types of things. One thing West Virginia fans were concerned about, are we going to have another coach who's going to leave in a year? And it's always a concern, right? I mean, there's no way to 100% know for sure that won't happen. But one of the things that was brought up in this presser and that I think might help him stay longer is the fact that they're getting closer to his wife's family. His wife's family is from Maryland, or she's from Maryland. They also have family in Pennsylvania and in Ohio. So being right there in Morgantown, they would be able to travel to see family much easier. Family could travel to see them. They could probably get family to games, those types of things without a whole lot of trouble. So I think that might be a plus. They've been living in Texas for a long time, closer to his family. Now they can live closer to her family. So maybe that is something that will keep him in Morgantown longer than Darren DeVries, right? Because Darren DeVries pretty much left everybody behind to come to Morgantown. Funny story that Ross Hodge told in his opening remarks. He talked about the old John Rothstein quote that we all love. He talked about, it was West Virginia basketball, tougher than a long weekend at your in-laws. Well, he talked about how a long weekend at his in-laws is not that tough because he gets along really well with his mother-in-law, who actually was at this press conference. So I thought that was interesting. I mentioned how he doesn't curse much. He's not a type of coach that curses at players and stuff like that. He feels like there's a better way to get your point across. I respect that. Look, I have no issue with cursing. It doesn't offend me. I have, coaches who curse, don't curse. I don't really care. Whatever works for them. But I do respect a coach who doesn't curse. I think that's, shows that they're a person of high character. I'm not saying that cursing means you have low character. That ain't what I mean. But I think that is just, taking it a step further, right? Trying to make sure you run that your program is run the right way, that you have really high moral standards, those types of things. I think that is something that we can look at and respect here in the state of West Virginia. Again, I'm not people who curse. I curse occasionally myself. I'm not perfect, so I'm not offended by it. I'm just making a point. I do respect the fact that he doesn't have to curse to get his point across. Obviously, I mentioned the story about his mom working 3 jobs. She was a bus driver in the morning, then she was a teacher's aide, and then she worked at JCPenney at night. So again, I think a lot of West Virginians can relate to stories like that. Talked about how he had a quote, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said that, his dad had passed away. What better way to get close to my dad in heaven than to come to almost heaven? So I thought that was a really cool story that he told there. He's familiar with Coach Kellogg. They worked camps together over the years. That's going to help him, hopefully make him feel more comfortable in Morgantown. I really liked how he dug in and talked a lot about the history of West Virginia Mountaineer basketball. He went from Coach Gail Catlett to Beeline and then to Huggins and talked a really long time about that, and especially about Huggins and how he admired the fact that Bob Huggins loved his players but still held them accountable and still coached them hard. And he talked about the famous scene where Huggins got down on the floor with Deshaun Butler during the Final Four game, showed his compassion, and how he admired Coach Huggins for being able to be a guy who coaches these guys really hard and expects them to play hard, and he holds them accountable, but yet still at the same time loves his guys with everything in him. So I really, really appreciated the fact that Ross Hodge, knows West Virginia basketball, and if he didn't, he did his research and to prepare for this press conference. And the fact that he wasn't afraid to acknowledge past coaches, the history, and he even talked about West Virginia, the brand. Later on, he talked about the West Virginia brand holding a lot of weight, how, recruits know about the brand and it's helping in recruiting. I admired that as well. Talked about, the logo, Jerry West. He even mentioned how he and Wren Baker are friends, and he mentioned how he texted Wren Baker after West Virginia defeated Iowa State in the Jerry West throwback uniforms, said he loved those throwback uniforms. And then he talked about how he had a lot of respect for Coach Joe Mazzulla and his faith and how he puts his faith front and center. Here's a quote he had that I really liked. He said, "Coaches can win games, administrations win championships." And that could not be further from the truth, especially in today's era. And he talked about he that was a segue into him talking about how great of an AD Wren Baker was. Now, it came out today in an article over on the VIP board, the message board from Mike Kazaza about, and I'm not going to give the whole thing away out of respect for Mike, but he talked, there is some language in Ross Hodge's contract that ties him to Wren Baker. Basically, if Wren Baker leaves West Virginia before Ross Hodge does, Ross Hodge's buyout declines pretty dramatically, at least early on in the contract. So I could say that is that may sound like a bad thing on the surface, but I don't think it's that unusual in coaches' contracts for a coach to be tied to an AD or a president. I mean, Neil Brown's contract had language in it like that. I don't think we should panic over that. I don't think it means Wren Baker's leaving anytime soon, even though I don't think Wren Baker's going to be at West Virginia a long time. He's eventually going to land a job at a blue blood school at some point, in my opinion, and he's probably going to take one at some point. If Oklahoma ever comes open, he might he might even take Oklahoma State if it comes open, because that's where he's from. right? And he actually has ties to Oklahoma State. So even though they're not necessarily a blue blood. But my point being, Wren Baker is not going to be at West Virginia forever. So I don't think most of us expect that. I'm hoping he's there long enough to get us into at least into the first few years of this new era of house settlement, ref sharing, and all this other stuff. We need Wren Baker in that seat. I think he's the guy for the job. So hopefully he's there a few more years, at least. But I don't expect he'll be there forever. And it's not that unusual for a new AD to bring in his own coach, or it's not unusual for a coach to leave a program after an AD change, because it's like any other job, man. Who you work for can make your job a good job or a bad job. And if you have a really close relationship with your boss, it's going to make it a better job. It's no different in coaching, right? So I don't think it's that big of a deal. I don't think we should panic or be concerned about that. But they are sort of tied at the hip, so to speak. But again, it's pretty common in college athletics. Talked about West Virginia's fan base and how they had such a great home court advantage. He talked about how West Virginia is rated as the number one home court advantage in the country, according to Ken Palm. That's a big deal. We've heard Wren Baker talk about that multiple times as well. He talked about his love for the outdoors, how he kind of grew up he was a city boy growing up, but when he worked in Colorado Springs for a little while at Colorado State, that got him, he fell in love with the outdoors there, fell in love with the mountains there, and now he likes to hike and do things, he and his family. So he's really excited about living in the mountains again. I thought that was pretty cool. That's something else that can maybe keep him here a while, right? So I like that. And then he went and talked about his style of play and how he feels like you have to play good defense, especially in the Big 12, if you want to be good. He mentioned Houston multiple times in his press conference. Houston has won the Big 12 2 years in a row. They've been the best defensive team in the Big 12 2 years in a row. He talked about how Kansas, the years they won the Big 12, they had the best defense in the league. So, yes, defense wins, and that's exactly what he's bringing to the table at West Virginia. Before I get to the rest of these notes, though, I do need to give a quick shout out to my channel, my primary channel sponsor here. So hang on, and I'll be back in about 35, 40 seconds. Since 1931, the attorneys at Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident, are fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians, because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. I was muted. Thank you very much for letting me get through the housekeeping and giving that shout out to my sponsor. Also want to give a shout out to Appalachia Digital. They're the fine folks who designed my brand new website, wvsportschat.com. If you have a small business and you want to design a new website or a website, check them out. Go to appalachiadigital.com/Couz. That can also help you out. If you already have a website and you want to get found on Google, go check them out. They will be able to help you with that as well. Again, go to appalachiadigital.com/Couz. Let them know I sent you. And I want to thank them also for helping to support the show here. Let's keep rolling. Let me get in to see if I got any comments here that I will get to comments later. Make sure I'm not missing any super chats or anything like that. I do have some VIP members chiming in. Shaq in the house. He says, roughly 30 people in here. If you could hit the X button and give the video a like, please. Thank you, Shaq. I appreciate that, my man. Tosh says he thinks we should support new coaches till given a reason not to, and Shaq agrees. For sure, Tosh can't succeed if you don't have support. Word. All right. Let's go ahead and keep rolling here. Next notes, I've got Wren. They asked Wren about, when they were doing the question and answer portion, they asked Wren about, when Ross Hodge was an assistant coach under Grant McCaslin at North Texas, and you were the AD, talking about Wren, did you see how good of a coach Ross was? And could you see him being a head coach one day? And he basically said yes, he did. And he actually said that had he been at North Texas, when Grant McCasland left, he likely would have promoted Hodge to head coach. He also said he knew how much Grant McCasland relied on Ross Hodge, especially on the defensive portion of the coaching. So that's been rumored and even reported by multiple outlets. And it sounds like Wren Baker has now confirmed that Ross Hodge was an integral part of Grant McCasland's success at North Texas and helped propel him to the Texas Tech job. So I think Ross Hodge is a good basketball coach, and Wren Baker recognized it early on while he was at North Texas as well. I do have a super chat that came in. I want to get to that real quick. I appreciate the super chat. Mark Painter in the house. He says, about time you are back, bro. Yeah, I had to go out of town for a couple days for work, so I was not able to do any content. It was meeting, then a company dinner, then another meeting, then a company dinner. Then I didn't get home till late last night, and I was exhausted from 2 days of meetings and all the travel. So I was going to try to do this live show last night, and I was just tired. And I thought, you know what, I'll just do it on my lunch break tomorrow. So here I am with my lunch hour live stream. I try to do these when I can. Mark Painter says, if Hodge doesn't leave, we will be good. Just get him to the portal quick. Yes, and that's something else I want to touch on here in a minute. Well, we'll go ahead and touch on it now since you brought it up, Mark. They asked him about, hey, did you, how hard was it for you to coach North Texas in the NIT while also trying to, recruit the portal at West Virginia? And I thought his answer made sense. He said, look, even if I had stayed at North Texas, I was going to be having to recruit the portal for them anyway. He said, I was going to have to spend about 70% of my time recruiting the portal for North Texas because they were losing most of their roster as well. So I would have been doing the exact same thing. It just so happens I was recruiting the portal for West Virginia instead of North Texas. So he still was able to do what he would always do, recruit the portal. He was just doing it for a different team this time. So I think that makes sense, right? In this portal era, coaches are having to divide their time even more so than they probably did in the past. This time it just so happened he was doing it for another team. Another VIP member chimes in here. James Green, what's up, my man? He says, Couz finally caught you live. I think it's a great hire. Let's go Mountaineers in all sports. James, I appreciate your support, my brother. Thank you for being a VIP member. And I'm glad you could catch it as well. But you guys always know, if you don't catch my live shows, you can always go back and check the replays out. And I know the replays are, I'm sure you like the interaction of a live show. You can get in the chat room and chat it up with fellow members of the Couz's Corner family and all that. I get that. But if you do miss the videos, you can always watch the replays. And for those of you who might be late coming in, this is live streaming on both Couz's Corner and Hoops from the Hills. I did a poll on my channels, and an overwhelming 70% of the responses said, hey, I asked, hey, should I start combining my content on one channel? Would it make it easier for you? 70% of the responses said yes, it would. So I'm going to start trying to do more basketball and football content on Couz's Corner. The Hoops from the Hills channel is not going anywhere. I'll still keep putting the stuff up there as well, at least for now, until I figure out what I'm doing with the channel long term. But right now it's streaming on both channels. I'm also streaming on X. Again, if you're watching on X, please come over, subscribe to both channels, please. Like I said, they're not going away. And please hit the thumbs up button over there as well and check out my other content. Let's keep rolling here. Hoppy asked him a very tough question. One of the first questions out of the gate. Second question, I think. Hoppy Kirchville basically asked him, and I'm paraphrasing, the previous coach here didn't lay roots down. And Wren mentioned in his opening statements of the day that, he one of the things he looked for, he wanted a coach that would put down roots in West Virginia and embrace being there. And he felt like Ross would do that. Hoppy said, hey, what can you tell Mountaineer fans about that, knowing the previous coach didn't do that? It was, I applaud Hoppy for asking a tough question there. And I thought Ross had a good answer. Some of it was coach speak. Some of it actually mimicked some similar stuff Darren DeVries said a year ago. But Hodge went into a little bit more detail, though. He basically said, no, he admitted it wasn't an easy decision. There were some tears shed. They had a lot of close relationships with people in Texas. It was not easy to leave Texas. But he also talked about how, he had chances to leave when he was an assistant at North Texas. He had chances to leave for bigger jobs. And I think he might have even said head coaching jobs, but correct me if I'm wrong. But he had chances to leave for better, higher paying jobs at bigger brands while he was an assistant at North Texas, and he chose not to. And he pointed out how there was only a handful of opportunities he would have left for, West Virginia being one of them. That is similar to what Darren DeVries told us a year ago. So, I think there was probably some coach speak built in, but I also think there was some honesty and some genuineness as well in there, especially when he admitted it was a very tough decision. There were tears shed, all that. It can't be easy for somebody to uproot and pull their, he has to pull his kids out of school. His daughter's a junior in high school. I'm sure that's not easy to do. It's hard. It's hard on a family to do that. And these are people at the end of the day. We look at them as coaches. When we're as fans, we look at them as coaches a lot of times, but we don't look at them as people. They are people with real emotions, real struggles, real curiosities, real challenges, real families, all this stuff, right? We cannot lose sight of that, man. And sometimes as fans, I think we have a tendency to do that. These are people at the end of the day with feelings, with emotions. So we need to remember that. All right. He talked about how he's not interested in going to bigger brands. He wants a place he can call home. Someone asked him about his recruiting. What you're going to be recruiting here. He basically said, look, I'm recruiting nationally. We have to recruit nationally. And he went into a story about how when he was coaching at the JUCO level, which, they had to rebuild rosters every year at the JUCO level. So he's accustomed to doing this. But he talked about how they spent like several days recruiting the East Coast. Keep in mind, he was coaching in Texas. They would, recruit Maryland, Virginia, D.C., Jersey, various states, Pennsylvania, I guess, I think he even mentioned. But nonetheless, he would spend like a week or 2 weeks at a time on the East Coast. And, so he's accustomed to recruiting the East Coast. So, and he obviously has ties to Texas. So he'll be recruiting Texas as well. So I think he has a really good chance there to recruit well at West Virginia using all of his various relationships and connections from his previous jobs. Someone asked him a really good question about, what qualifies you. So the fans have questions about your qualifications. Some do. And I think this was a Mike Ostie question. Some fans may have questions about your qualifications. You only have 2 years of head coaching experience at the D1 level. You never made it to an NCAA tournament game as a head coach. What makes you qualified for this job? And he basically went into how, I have confidence in my ability to get to an NCAA tournament and win games and win championships. He said because he's been an assistant coach for coaches who have done that, on staffs who have done that, on teams who have done that. So he's learned from them. He mentioned Larry Eustachy, the former coach at Iowa State, who won the Big 12. He mentioned, obviously, Grant McCaslin at North Texas. So, and he, even talked about his JUCO days where he could work for great coaches who won a lot of games and a lot of championships at their respective levels. And good answer, right? And he didn't flinch. He answered it. I could tell he answered it with confidence. He has confidence in his coaching ability, and you can tell that. He's a humble guy, but he's also a confident guy, and I like that. They asked him about I already talked about the portal where he, said he would have been recruiting the portal at North Texas anyway. He just did it for West Virginia instead during that 1 week period. They were asking, there's been one of the question marks about Ross Hodge has been his offense. His offense plays a slower pace. They didn't score a bunch of points, those types of things. So someone asked him about that. How do you address that? And he basically talked about how, the offense, just because we played at a slower pace doesn't mean we weren't a good offense. He talked about how they were the second best in offensive efficiency in the American Conference. They had one of the better 3-point shooting percentages in the American Conference for the last 2 years there. And he even talked about how teams have used the slow pace of play against him in recruiting. And here's his response. And I love this response. Guess who was one spot above us in pace of play? Houston. And they're playing in the Final Four right now. So Houston doesn't play at a fast pace, and nobody questions that because they're winning games and going and winning conference titles and going to Final Fours. And he feels like they can do the same thing at West Virginia with a defensive first mindset, and then you build your offense around your personnel. He said he's not married to any certain style of play offensively, or heck, even defensively for that matter. He's going to base it on his personnel. And I like that approach. I think that's a great approach, and I appreciate him mentioning that. Let me get to a couple more comments here before we get too far along. I've got a couple more VIP members in the house. Denny Allen says, Jacob, true, and we should always strive to do just that, but you can't say a coach is bad or not a good hire if they do not do it consistently. Darren lost to Houston badly and Colorado, buddy. What did Jacob say? Jacob said Darren beat Kansas and Gonzaga first year. Okay, got it. I think there's a debate there as to whether Darren DeVries is a great coach or not. WVU Fan 13 says, I feel good with the hire. He definitely won the press conference. I thought the question that Hoppy asked was a little unfair, but he had to be asked. Sounds like Hodges has a lot of hurt from DeVries. Hoppy has a lot of hurt from DeVries. I don't think so. Hoppy has been known in the past to ask the tougher questions. I mean, for example, on the Three Guys Before the Game show, when they have Wren and other people on, he's usually the one who asks the tougher questions, right, about conference realignment and those types of questions. He's usually the one who asks that because he doesn't work. He doesn't work for West Virginia, number one, West Virginia University. B, Hoppy's semi-retired. He doesn't care to piss somebody off. What are they going to do, kick him out? He doesn't care, right? Has nothing to lose at this point. So, I actually appreciated the question, and I felt like Hoppy worded it in a way. I felt like he worded it in a way that wasn't disrespectful. So I actually had no issue with the question. And as a fan, I actually appreciate the fact he asked a tough question because I'll be honest, I love the media, West Virginia media. Most of them are really good at what they do. But there are times, in my opinion, they don't ask enough tough questions. And so I actually respected the fact that he did that. Got Jacob Yoho in the house, Veritax, Jay Brumfield, Daniel Sargent. Daniel Sargent says he's officiated a Hawthorne game 4 times last year. He shoots a lot of shots and only scored around 22 points a game in high school on a load of shots, and he's good in the paint, struggles on threes. He's talking about Braden Hawthorne, who was the 4-star recruit at West Virginia, in-state 4-star recruit that had committed to WVU and has now reopened his recruiting. I did see somebody comment, Leo Cole commented that Tucker has officially signed with Indiana. I saw that as well. I don't think that was a big surprise to any of us. Let's keep rolling here with the content. They asked him about the timeline for hiring a staff, said he has no timeline. He's not going to rush the process. He did admit, he did say that, hey, there will be some guys coming with me from North Texas. And he did talk about, how the West Virginia brand holds a lot of weight, carries a lot of weight. And there are a lot of coaches who would be interested in coaching with him at West Virginia. So, I think we've heard Coach Rod say the same thing in football. So not a surprise there. They asked him about non-conference scheduling. He will have a say and input on scheduling along, in collaboration with Wren Baker. Talked about how he thinks patience is the best route to go there. You want to be patient when putting together a schedule. You don't want to be too late in the game, getting your schedule out, or getting your schedule, completed necessarily. You want to get your schedule done as quick as you can, but you have to be patient to make sure that you get the games you want. You don't want to rush and schedule a bunch of games that aren't going to help your program. And he also talked about the importance of playing some tough non-conference games. That way, when you get into conference play, you're prepared for it. It won't be a shock, so to speak. So I thought that was a great response there. Thank you, Big Dan T, for the super chat. Appreciate it, my guy. You've always been a huge supporter of mine. Dan is one of my first VIP members, has been one from ever since I opened up memberships on Couz's Corner. He's been there for me. Dan, I appreciate it. If you're watching on Who's from the Hills, obviously I don't have VIP members set up over there, but you can if you want to be a channel member, come over to Couz's Corner and support me over there. As I mentioned earlier, I am going to start doing more basketball content on the Couz's Corner channel. So, I want to be your go-to source for all West Virginia sports, right? At least the main 2 sports. I've had people ask me to do some baseball content. Man, I'd love to, but I'll be honest, I'm not sure. It's hard to find the time. You guys know I have a full-time job, a family. Uh, it's hard enough for me to get out the content I want to get out on basketball and football. Doing another sport would probably be extremely tough. And so I'm sure you guys understand that. But we are covering the baseball team over at WVSportsChat.com. So you can come over and check out the great articles that Shauna Rose has been writing over there on the baseball team. So if you do want baseball news, the website has it, WVSportsChat.com. Daniel, great point, man. Great segue, right? WVU baseball's doing awesome. They're 24-4 right now, ranked in the top 25, coming off a huge win against Pitt in the backyard brawl. Before that, they beat Ohio State. They are scoring runs at a high clip. I think they've 10-run ruled 2 teams in the past, 2 weeks, week and a half, something like that. They are putting up massive offensive numbers this year. So hats off to that team. They're playing really, really good baseball right now. Let's see. Where were we at? Talked about the non-con schedule. They asked him about resources. He obviously talked about the great facilities. Said he could not believe that facility, Western Practice Facility, and everything was built 12 years ago. And obviously, as fans, most of us know Bob Huggins was responsible for that. Tip of the cap to Bob Huggins for having the foresight to build and raise the money and get that facility built. Coach Hodge and every coach that's ever been in there has said it's one of the best in the country. At the time it was built, it probably was the best in the country. I'm sure others have probably caught up now, but West Virginia still stacks up with some of the best in the country as far as basketball facilities. Coach Hodge talked about how the facilities, having more resources to pay players, things like that, was part of the allure for him taking the job. He does want to be able to help players more than he was able to do at previous stops. When talking about the offense, he obviously, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but he talked about how there's more than one way to. I love the fact that he used the phrase, there's more than one way to skin a cat, because that is a phrase I use often. And that's one, I wrote that down because to me, he just fits. Yes, he's from Texas, but I think Texans and West Virginians have a lot in common. I really do. Hardcore work, hardcore, blue collar, grit, toughness, determination. I think both of those states have that. Texas is a state with oil well drilling and farming, ranchers, just hardworking people. West Virginia, you have hardworking people. A lot of them, even though the coal mining industry is not what it used to be, this state was kind of built on the backs of coal miners, right? Hardworking, blue collar coal miners. Many of those still out there. And, many of the people in my family worked in the coal mines. So I love the fact that he has that same, what I call, right in the thumbnail, in the title, Mountaineer mentality. I think he has it. And hopefully that means he'll fit in more with the culture of West Virginia. I'm not saying Darren DeVries didn't have grit, determination, toughness, and all that. I just feel like there's a culture thing. And again, like I mentioned earlier in the show, being closer to his wife's family is going to help with that. There will be some familiar faces within driving distance. Hopefully that helps. And I know John Kristofik is saying that he thinks he'll leave after a year for a better job, and maybe he does. But we don't know that for a fact. And, it would probably have to be a certain type of job before he'll take it. And, I think West Virginia, there was some bad luck that the Indiana job just happened to come open this year. And that happened to be one of Darren DeVries' dream jobs. For Ross Hodge, I don't know what that dream job would be. Would it be Texas? Would it be Texas A&M? Both of those jobs already been filled this year. So they likely won't come open again next year. So I'm not so sure that he would look. Plus, his familiarity with Wren Baker is going to help. He knows Mark Kellogg. They both, I think, came from the same area. They used to work together at camps a lot. There's some familiarity there. I think that'll help. I think there are a lot of things that might help keep Ross Hodge in Morgantown that didn't exist with DeVries. DeVries and Wren didn't have a previous relationship, to my knowledge. I don't think Darren knew anybody else at West Virginia at the time. He didn't have family. Neither he or his wife had family close to West Virginia. There were just so many things, or there are so many things, in my opinion, that play in West Virginia's favor now that didn't exist with DeVries. But again, if his dream, I don't know what his dream job is. If it comes open, he might leave. But again, you cannot not hire a coach because you're afraid he'll leave, because that could happen with anybody. Heck, Coach Rod is from West Virginia. He even left at one time. So there's no guarantee anybody's going to stay. Drumwolf, another saying that Drumwolf said, how about this room is so small that if you skinned a cat, you would get fur in your teeth? Have you heard? I've not heard that one exactly. I've heard, what was the one I heard about a cat? If you threw a cat, Drumwolf, I've heard another one about a cat, but I cannot remember how it was worded, man. So but that is a good one. I like that one. Stanley Metz Jr. says, years ago, Tony used to tell the truth, but in a nice way. Even then, he was striking it up. Now he pushes false narratives and ignores fact when things aren't kosher. By the way, speaking, and I don't want to talk about Darren DeVries a ton, but did you guys see that where I think it was it Connor Enright? Anyway, there's a former Drake player who played at another school this past season who apparently did the same thing Tucker DeVries did, set out the season right around the 8th or 9th game. About the same time Tucker DeVries did, and about the same time the Indiana job came open. Another coincidence here, right? I just wanted to throw that out there. I thought that was extremely odd. Assuming that's true, somebody posted on Twitter, and I know you can't believe everything you see on social media, but I did see that out there. We've got Denny Allen, another comment. He says, the other side of the coin is, if they do leave, that means you are having success. If no one is after your coach, you're losing. Denny, that's a great point. I'd rather be a winning program who loses their coach every year or every other year than a losing program who never wins, especially in today's landscape. You're not going to get, the revenue you need, and you're not going to, if there's a super league ever formed or whatever, you have less chance to get included if you're not being successful in the two major sports. It's just the way it is. And as fans, we don't want to cheer for a losing team, right? None of us do. Was it something about defying gravity by taping a piece of buttered toast on a cat's back? No, it was not that either. Man, there's all kinds of cat ones out there, apparently. Drumwolf says, my son worked for Fox Sports Network, and he met Tony. He said he was arrogant and snobbish. I've met Tony before, and Tony has been super nice to me. I do not dislike Tony Caridi as a person. I just want to make that clear, okay? I totally disagree with how he's handled and the comments he made regarding what he said about. I know he backtracked and said he wasn't intending to call people who believe that dumbasses. He was just talking about conspiracy theorists in general, but even that I don't agree with, right? I know a lot of conspiracy theorists, and I don't think they're dumb people. They just view things, they view the world differently than me. I actually just lost a coworker a couple days ago who was a conspiracy theorist. He was a great human being, man. Had a heart of gold, heart as big as Texas, would do anything for you. Was just a super guy. And he wasn't a dumbass. He just viewed the world differently than I did. He was actually really intelligent. He was a great musician. He was great working on computers and doing things with computers, much smarter than me. So it's an inaccurate statement to say that. But that being said, I don't think I'm not going to sit here and bash Tony Caridi's character as a man. I just disagree with how he handled that situation. And I've disagreed with him on some other things too that he said, but I don't want to character assassinate him over one or two little incidents. If that makes sense. But, Drumwolf, your son has a right to his opinion, and I'm not saying it's invalid. Based on my personal experience, let me tell you a story. I met Tony one time. I have a cousin who really looks up to Tony Caridi, and that cousin has some challenges. I'll just leave it at that. And Tony Caridi made a video for him. I met Tony. I said, hey, Tony, can I get a picture to send to my cousin? He said, I'll do you one better than that. He said, give me your phone. He does a video of Tony and I together, and send and I sent that to my cousin was so tickled to death. So I really want to. I like Tony Caridi. Again, I don't. My experiences meeting Tony have been good in person. I thought he dropped the ball on that one thing and some other few things. And he's had other opinions over the years I've disagreed with him, and I called him out on it. Again, it doesn't mean I dislike him. And heck, I still watch his show. I still enjoy Three Guys. The show they did yesterday was really good. It was entertaining. It was funny. I'm still going to keep supporting it. And if you don't, that's your prerogative. We all have a right to make that choice. But I just thought he was way out of line with the comments he made about that situation. That's all. Denny Allen says, Couz the same. I have met Tony. Hold on. Why does these things keep? I get these things that pop up on my screen and I can't get them off. Here we go. All right. Denny says, I have met Tony and he was very kind. The dumbass comment was bad, but you have to remember Tony works for the university, so he can't say a lot of negative about coaches. Right, Denny, and I do get that, but here's the problem. One of the issues I had with that is they bashed Don Plitzowhite when she left West Virginia the way she did. They bashed her. I don't remember what episode it was. It's been a couple years ago, obviously, but they bashed her, basically. I mean, they didn't character assassinate her, but they talked about the way she left was bad, and now, it wasn't a good look and all that. They never did that one time with Darren DeVries. Not one time. Why are they holding him to a different standard than they did her? Is there personal animosity there? Did they really like Darren and become friends with him and don't want to say anything negative? I don't know. But to me, there's a double standard there. He basically did the exact same thing she did to a degree. So why would they not be willing to criticize him if they criticized her? That was the problem I had. And then the dumbass comment was out of line to me. Yeah, Danny, I had too until somebody, actually, I don't remember who mentioned it on social media, but somebody else mentioned it and it reminded me. I was like, man, that's true. Pretty same situation. And they did not care to, again, they didn't bash her character. They didn't, they were professional in how they did it, but they did criticize her. Can they not do the same thing for Darren? I don't like the double standard there, That's another thing that bothered me. And of course, like I mentioned, the comments. WVU Fan 13 says, I think Tony was blindsided by DeVries leaving. He felt he was on the inner circle and didn't see that DeVries was looking elsewhere. It made him look bad. That's possible, WVU Fan 13. That's a side of it I hadn't really considered. But, yeah, Darren is – Tony's – look, I'm not going to – like I said, I'll probably see Tony. I'm hoping to make it to the Mountaineer Coaches Caravan at Glade Spring again this year. I'm hoping – Tony will probably be there. And, I don't know if he saw my show or not. It might be uncomfortable. If he did, it might be uncomfortable. But nonetheless, I felt like I had a right to call him out, just like he has a right to say what he said. It wasn't personal. Shaq says, I delivered to Tony at his office one time, and he was fantastic in person. But that comment still has me irritated. Just my opinion. See, I appreciate that. Most of us, and I think everybody in this chat probably falls in the same category. Most people are able to separate one incident or something we disagree with from a person's character. Now, if you've had a bad experience with Tony, then obviously I'm not going to sit here and ask you to like him, because that is the way I view and judge people is usually based on my own personal experiences. I do not like, as I've had people in the past who have tried to get me to change my opinion of a person that we both mutually knew based on how they treated them. And I didn't have the same experience. So I didn't feel like it was fair for me to dislike them just because they had a bad experience with them. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that's just how I've lived my life. I base my judgments of people based on my own personal experiences or opinions. That's just the way I am, man. And I don't, like I said, right or wrong, that's me. And that's just the way I look at life. Standing Mesh Jr. says, it seems WVU has changed the line they have to toe, but even so, you can speak negative truths in a nice way without reflecting bad on the university and et cetera. That 100%, Stanley Metz, very well said. There's a way to do it and a way not to do it. Now, the way I did it, not sure if it was professional, but I don't have to answer. I try to do things the right way, but, I'm not affiliated with the university at all. So I sort of have a little bit more leverage, right? Or a little bit more flexibility on how I respond. I didn't think I got personal, but I did call them out about it. And I felt like it was wrong for them to say what they said. Because like I said, I know people personally who were conspiracy theorists. I know multiple people actually who were conspiracy theorists. One recently passed, was a great guy, a friend, great human being. I know other people who were conspiracy theorists who are, you guess what? Great human beings. And they're also not dumb people. They're intelligent people. They just view things differently. We don't all have to view the world from the same lens, man. And that's what frustrates me about politics is a lot of us get stuck in our silos and our bubbles and aren't willing to even listen to the other side, even if we disagree, you know. Sorry about that. I didn't have a chance to hit the mute button before I had to cough. It came on me quick. But anyway, I don't really have a whole lot else to say about it. Make sure I covered all my bases here. Yep. But anyway, I think this hire of Ross Hodge is a good hire. I thought he won the press conference. I feel like he's a great cultural fit at West Virginia. I am a little mad at him, though. I'm a little mad at him because he's the same age as me. I don't see gray hair on his head. I don't see wrinkles on his face. But yet he and I are the same age, and it makes me mad. Ross Hodge, I got a problem with you and your boyish good looks, as you like to call them. So anyway, guys, hold on. I got to mute this. Sorry about that. It was the wife, guys. And, she doesn't call me very often from work. So I figured if she's calling me from work, it must be important. So I felt like I better grab it. Anyways, everything's good. And I apologize for that. Good thing about a live show. Yeah, call from Tony calling me out, right? Big Dan T. And somebody else said it was Ross Hodge calling. I wish it was Ross Hodge calling. Anyway. And yeah, and he does have hair, Shaq. It's a great point. He's got a full, thick head of hair, no gray and no wrinkles. I got a problem with that, Mr. Hodge. You and I need to sit down face to face. I have an issue with that. You and I are the same age. I look like this and you look like that, man. Something that math just doesn't math. You know what I mean? But anyway, now, in all seriousness, I like to hire. I think he's a good cultural fit for West Virginia. I hope he has success and stays a long time. He and Wren Baker both. I like the defensive first mentality of Ross Hodge. I do think that's what West Virginia needs. Will he play a slow pace of offense? I don't know. I think it's yet to be determined. It probably will depend on the personnel he's able to get in Morgantown, the types of players he's able to get, maybe the staff members he's able to hire. Maybe he brings in an assistant coach who's a really, really great offensive mind, and he lets him run the offense, just like an offensive coordinator in football. There are a lot of different ways. As he said, there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? So I don't know that we know. We're going to get a team who probably shoots pretty good from three and who's going to play really good defense. That's two things you can probably almost hang your hat on. Everything else, and they're going to play hard, obviously, which I think that and playing good defense go hand in hand. But outside of that, we don't know what we're getting. But I do like the hire. I'm getting behind the hire. I'm hoping all of Mountaineer Nation does. I think we need to support him until, like somebody said in chat, let's support him until we're given a reason not to. So in that regard, Denny Allen says, us brothers of the hairline need to stick together. Yeah, Stanley, me, you, Denny, all of us. Yep, absolutely. What Dan T say? Oh, that was Tony calling me. Yeah. Oh, man. Shaq says, hey, if I can talk to Nico's dad, would you and Paul want to try to do a collaboration on an NIL deal? Maybe get Nico on the show. Maybe, Shaq. Maybe. We'll see. I'm definitely open to it. As long as it's, I mean, we'd obviously have to get some sponsors and whatnot to sponsor the show. But I'm open to it. John Christophic says, Couz saves money on haircuts. I do. I haven't had a haircut in over 20 years, man. Now I spend a lot of money on razors, but it's cheaper than haircuts. Oh, yes, Michelle, great point. I didn't write that one down. He talked about respecting your opponent, but not fearing your opponent. Somebody asked a question about playing in the American Conference versus the Big 12, and he talked about how he always teaches his guys to respect every single opponent, regardless of what league they play in, you know? And I think that's the right approach. A little bit of coach speak, but I think listen, some coach speak is legitimate, right? There are certain viewpoints you have to have as a coach. You have to respect your opponent or you'll get beat, right? So that's not, even though it might be coach speak, it's true. You can't look past opponents or they will beat you. Doesn't matter what sport you're in. So thank you for reminding me of that, Michelle. That was a good one. H. and Chilla says, as a viewer, would love to see Nico. Shaq says he sees his dad all the time. That would be great. I'd love to do an NIL deal with him, man. And if I can get, if me and Paul collaborate on it, that'd be great. I'm open to it. But anywho, the problem is the challenge there would be whose show do we do it on, right? Both of us are going to want the credit, are going to want the money for that show. So that would be challenging. Denny Allen says, I think he is a great hire, but I am a little concerned if his name carries enough weight to bring in higher tier recruits. Denny, that's a fair concern. That's a fair concern. I'm hoping that, players talk to each other around the country because of the AAU circuit. A lot of these players know each other, and hopefully, players will get word that he's a really good coach, and that will carry over. We'll see. And again, just like Chester Frazier was able to help recruit for DeVries out of the portal, maybe he brings in an assistant coach with a bigger name who's able to do the same thing, right? Again, the staff he hires is going to be critical. I think that sometimes that gets overlooked. The assistant coaches play a huge role on any staff. I don't care what sport it is. And the staff he hires are going to play a huge role in recruiting. Tosh talks about the phrase drunker than a three-legged cat on a frozen lake. That's a good one, Tosh. That's a good one, man. Thank you. We've got to find more sponsors for the basketball side. Yeah, and there's something I'm working on there as well, guys. I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag because it may not work out, but I am working on something on that front too. I'm not getting my hopes up that it'll work, but I do have something I'm hoping. I'm trying to get a very special guest on the show. We'll see if it works. Christopher West says he liked what Coach Hodge had to say. Darren DeVries had an ace in the hole. Come here and you can play with Tucker. I hope it's a non-issue because I think he can coach. Denny, that's another good one. He had Tucker DeVries to kind of build the team around. Hodge is not going to have that. So another fair point. Well, listen, I'm going to jump off here. I did this on my lunch break at work. So I've got to get back to work, get back to my day job. I appreciate everybody tuning into the show. Again, if you're watching on X, please come over to YouTube. Check out my previous content, whether it's Hoops from the Hills or Couz's Corner. Please check it out. Please hit the like button on this show if you're watching it, whether you're live or whether you're watching it on the replay. The likes really, really help. Leave comments. That helps as well. Thanks to everybody for hopping on. Thanks for tuning into the show. Hope the rest of your day is top shelf. Shout out again to my sponsors, Cats, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner, and Appalachia Digital. God bless. Q Country Roads.